Hello there, this is Jenny here from Designs with Paper. Thanks for stopping by my channel today. I have an art journal video for you today. It is my August interpretation of the Mission Inspiration Art Journal prompt. So here is the recipe card for August 2021. I will be using a page of mixed media paper from this homemade art journal notebook. And the colors for this month are sage, peach, and plum. The ingredients are tickets, fabric, border, lettering, lines, and the theme is perfect patterns, abstract, geometric, repeating, natural, or made with human hands. So this piece of mixed media paper is 5.5 by 8.5 inches roughly, and I will begin using this lined stencil. It's a really big stencil. I bought it from Stampin' Up! A number of years ago when they first started making their stencils. Ignore my fingernail polish. I know it's glaringly ugly right there, but I knew I was going to get dirty making this page and didn't want to redo my nails until it was done. I have taped the stencil. Well, first I taped my paper to my craft mat, and now I am taping the stencil on. Because it is quite large and the lines are very long, it is also very flexible, and I want it to move as little as possible. I will be putting some texture paste, that's the word, texture paste, through this stencil, and my texture paste has gotten kind of hard, much harder than it was when I purchased it because I forgot to leave the plastic over the top of it. I am going to apply this rather stiff texture paste with a plastic palette knife, and I am only moving down. I don't want to move sideways. I don't want the lines on that stencil to move. I am going to attempt to put texture paste over the majority of this page. I won't get it all the way covered. I'm not looking for perfection, but I do want the lines to go up and down for most of the page. And I'm just doing a very thin layer. I am spreading it on thick and then smoothing it back out. And the texture paste in between the lines on the stencil is really only about the same height as the stencil itself. So it's not very thick, but it does what I want it to do. It adds a layer of interest. It adds the lines to the bottom, the first layer of my art journal page. And it just gives you something to look at, something to be kind of there, like, oh, I see that, but I don't really see that. It's not the first thing you notice when you look at the page. I really should throw this texture paste out and get some new stuff. But I can't handle it. I can't handle throwing away my craft supplies if they're moderately useful. And this is still moderately useful. So I will go ahead and remove that stencil and the tape and wipe the stencil off, any excess texture paste off the stencil real quick. I don't want it to harden on the stencil because it will not come off. Most of this video is done in real time. I did speed up the cleanup and the drying with my heat tool. I didn't cut it out this time because this was a pretty quick page in and of itself. So I just kind of fast forwarded through that cleanup. Yeah, I don't really move that fast. So now that I have the cleanup done, I'm going to go ahead and use my heat tool to dry that texture paste. I want to make sure it is set up and ready to go for phase 2 or for the next step. And you can see the lines on that paper. It really does add a nice bit of texture to it. So for my next step, I am going to add white gesso over the top of this texture paste and the remainder of my paper that's exposed. I want to make sure that when I add paint or color to this page, that it doesn't just seep into the paper, that it applies smoothly and doesn't just kind of soak in and absorb all of the color, all of the paint. I'm not using a thick coat. This is a Liquitex gesso. It's a little bit runny, but not extraordinarily. I don't have to use a whole bunch to cover the whole page. And I'm just going to go right over the paper, right over the texture paste, and just kind of give this a nice non-porous surface to go ahead and start working on for the rest of my project. And when I was watching Mike give the prompts for this month, I did have one particular geometric shape come to mind It just kind of instantly popped to mind, and that is the shape of the hexagon. And when you see a hexagon, you think bees. So then I started thinking about how bees are described as always busy and always an industrious animal or creature on this earth. And that's kind of where my brain went. And that thought process kind of prompted the quote I add to my page at the end here. So I will go ahead and dry this gesso. I am using my heat tool, and it is sped up quite fast. I wish that my heat tool and my hand really went that fast, because my crafting I could get so much more crafting done if I could make it go that quickly. Okay, so for the first layer of color, I am adding this distress paint. It's acrylic paint, and it is in the color of marigold. It is the closest thing to peach that I had in my stash. Peach is not my favorite color. It's not my favorite food either, but it's not my favorite color, so I don't really have a lot of things in that color category. I looked for pattern paper. I looked for fabric scraps. I looked for just regular ink to blend on or something, and this was the closest I had, was this dried marigold distress paint. I am adding it with a mostly dry brush. I am not adding any water to the paint. I am not adding any water to my brush. I want it to be kind of a dry brush. It will add some more texture. It'll add some more visual interest to the page. And it also accentuates the lines that I've added with the texture paste, because I'm only going up and down. And because I'm using a dry brush, it kind of adds to that linear texture, that up and down line look that we added in the beginning. So now that I've cleaned off that craft mat, I will go ahead and dry this paint. It does not take very long to dry because it is already dry. I am having some issues with my camera moving, and my lighting is being really weird. I noticed when I was editing this video, it keeps kind of going in and out. And then I realized it's because we were having a partially cloudy day, so the sun kept coming in and out of the clouds, and even though the blinds and the curtains behind my desk are closed, it was still affecting the lighting. I have pulled out this hexagon. It's called reverse chicken wire or something like that from Heidi Swap. It's a Heidi Swap stencil, and I have two colors of distress paint. I have, what is that green one called? I don't know. It's a green paint, sage color paint, and a plum color paint. I can't remember what their names are. It'll come to me in a minute. See, this preserves is the purple, and cannot remember the color of the green paint. And for the first time and probably ever, I have cleaned off the supplies and put them all away before I do the voiceover, so I can't even look at the bottle to tell you. And I have just added kind of a crisscross shape of the green and the purple paint through that hexagon stencil, just for the color and as a addition to my hexagon shape. So looking at our recipe card, we have the sage, we have the peach, and we have the plum. We do have the lines, and we have started the perfect patterns with our geometric repeating shape. The next thing I'm going to work on is fabric. So I had some fat squares in my very minimal fabric collection that are this kind of burgundy, purple, and sage green color, and I have backed them with some double-sided adhesive. I think it was like a Sizzix sticky sheet or something like that. And I've pulled out my honeybee cuts, and I'm going to be using a couple of these small hexagon dies. And I will just go ahead and run those through my die cut machine off screen. That part I did edit out because it was like 10 minutes of nonsense. And there you can see my bad editing job. I have these hexagons here ready to adhere to my page. And I am just going to fast forward through this because it was nonsense trying to get that. I thought I was being so smart putting that sticky sheet on the back of the hexagon or the fabric before I cut it out. I thought that would make it so easy to adhere to the page. It was kind of a pain trying to get the sticky sheet off the back of the fabric. I did not anticipate that being quite as hard as it was. It was kind of weird. So once I figure out the layout here with the large and the small hexagons, and I'm trying not to have, like, my brain tends to see things in groups of evens, like 2 purples, 2 greens, 2 purples, 2 greens, patterns. And even though the theme of this is perfect patterns, I didn't want the pattern to be actually perfect, if that makes sense. Luckily, I had not counted the number of hexagons I cut out of the size. I just kind of put the 2 dies down on the fabric and cut it through as many times as that piece of fabric would fit. So here I will be using my pokey tool to kind of peel the adhesive the backing paper off the adhesive so that I can lay the hexagons down. I am intentionally putting some over the edge so that the pattern goes off the edge of the paper, and I will trim those down with scissors later. And this is actually more than double speed. It is like, I think I made this like 4 times faster than it needed to be. It was ridiculously, or 4 times faster than real life, I guess. It was a ridiculously difficult to get the backing paper off of the fabric. I think next time I use fabric, I will probably just use glue stick or double-sided tape or even liquid glue, because this was crazy weird to pull that off. But anyways, I am adhering the rest of my geometric pattern, and it's not necessarily a repeating pattern, but it is a geometric. I think I called it geographic before. Geometric pattern. All those G words that sound the same, goodness sakes. I'm just going to add them in groups with trying not to cover up the inked background too much, but also trying to remember where I had laid them down when I figured out how I wanted them all to go on. Yeah, I didn't take a picture. I just started picking them up and putting them back down. And yeah. So eventually I got all of those fabric hexagons cut out and stuck down to my page. And they also, again, kind of follow through that same pattern as the inked hexagons through the stencil. Just kind of a crisscross or a swooshy pattern down the page. I'm just going to go ahead and cut the fabric off the edges with some sharp scissors. It is sticking to the scissors, so I'm glad I used my honeybees because they are a non-stick scissor, a non-stick blade. Okay, so far we have included all 3 of our colors. We have included lines and we have included fabric. And I'm just going to go down this recipe card and figure out what else we're missing or what else I need to add. Tickets is the next thing, and border and lettering. We still have to figure out how to put a border and some lettering into this page. So I have an old punch. I can't remember if it was EK Success or Stampin' Up, and it punches these 2 sets of tickets at one time. So I pulled out a piece of light orange, not really peach, pattern paper, and I am going to glue those tickets onto my page. Now, in retrospect, and I realized this about as soon as I got them glued down, I should have inked up the edges before I glued them down. Yeah, I also should have put them in place before I started gluing them down because I did have to rearrange things a little bit. I am going to use some hand lettering. I hate my handwriting, but I am going to use some hand lettering to write the quote in these little punched out tickets, which is why where they were was kind of important to the whole page. Yeah, I should have laid them down. I should have inked up the edges and then laid them down before I started gluing them on so that I knew exactly where I was trying to put them. I didn't plan that part ahead very well, but it's okay because it turned out all right. So now I have my tickets on there, and I've grabbed this black Sharpie pen, and I've decided to go around the outside edges of the tickets, but because of the fine tip of the Sharpie pen and the texture paste on the page and the fabric, the texture of the fabric, this pen did not really do a fabulous job of outlining. So I decided I would pull out this Pitt Big it's a Pitt pen, it's the big brush pen, and kind of go around it that way. It has a brush tip as opposed to a fine tip bullet or a fine point bullet nib. Wow, that's a lot of weird words. And and anyway, use the brush tip to go around these tickets, and it kind of obliterated that ticket shape. You know how the corners on tickets are kind of cut in. It kind of obliterated that shape. But in real life, you can still see that it's there. So now that I have them outlined, I've decided that I don't know if I like it. I'm debating, do I start over? Okay, no, we're not going to start over. But I did pull out that Sharpie pen and decided to outline some of the hexagons that I put on the page with paint through the stencil. And this Sharpie pen does not really want to write on the texture paste still. And it could be that that pen is dying. I've had it for quite a while. So I just grabbed another one from my desk and kept going. And it's not a great outline. It's just kind of adding some dimension and texture and shape to those hexagons that were put on the page with paint through the stencil. And it kind of brings them from being invisible and not quite there to more a part of the geometric pattern, which is the whole theme of this page, geometric patterns. Now, I don't know if this is a perfect pattern, but it is a pattern and it is geometric, and I'm calling it perfect because it fits. Anyways, I'm just going to continue to go around these hexagons, and I started doing just the ones that I had done in the bundled sage. There we go. Bundled sage is the color of the green paint. The bundled sage paint. I did decide eventually that I think I want to outline all of the hexagons. So I kind of sped up the camera a little bit and just went around all of those hexagons. And it does make them more part of the foreground than the background. And that's what I wanted, because it is all about the shape. That is what I wanted. I did eventually decide to go around the fabric hexagons as well. So here we've got all of our colors. We've got our pattern. We've got our fabric, our ticket. We've got our lines and our bordering kind of sort of, because we drew lines around those hexagons, and that's kind of sort of bordering the hexagons. I am going to include the lettering here. And here is where my brain went. As I was watching Mike give us the prompt for the month of August, and the shape of hexagon came to mind. And I thought then, bees, and bees are busy, and they're considered one of the most industrious or hardworking animal or insect on our planet. And I realized that busy is not industrious. There are many, many times in my life when I am super busy, but I'm not necessarily busy doing anything industrious. And maybe I need to take a minute and think about, is my busy helpful, or is my busy just busy? Here is where I decided I wanted to outline those fabric hexagons. So I pulled in a Sharpie pen this time. It is not as flexible a brush as the Pitt pen, so it gives me a little bit more control over the edges and the shape of the hexagon. I didn't want to use that Pitt pen again and lose the shape of the hexagons because the brush nib is so large. I do like those the Pitt pens. They are India ink, and so once they dry, they are super permanent. You can't really do much with them, and so I really like those for art journal pages. But for this page, the nib was just a little bit too big. I have not experimented with Pitt's new pens. They stopped making the big brush pens and went down to a brush tip that's a little bit of more like the Sharpie, I guess, but with a brush nib. I have not experimented with any of those. They're on my things to play with list, but I have not acquired any as of yet. So here I am just going around all of these fabric hexagons, making sure that creates some more lines, because lines are one of the ingredients for this page. And also it adds to that border idea. All of these hexagons now have a border. And if you've ever seen a honeycomb, they are very much individual cells and a group as a whole at the same time. I pulled out, this is a different brush. It's a really small brush nib. I can't remember. It's a Faber-Castell pen, and it's got a brush nib, but it's not a super flexible brush nib. And I decided that's what I wanted to use for the border here. I am just drawing kind of a handwritten line. It's not straight by any means. And then I decided to grab my Sharpie pen again and just kind of make some zigzaggy edges around the border, the way I have seen Mike do a number of times on his inspiration or his art journal pages. And it just kind of adds a little bit of homemadeness to the art page or the art journal page. So here's my art journal page. I have included sage, peach, and plum. I have included all of the ingredients, ticket, fabric, border, lettering, and lines, and I have incorporated the theme of perfect patterns with that geometric pattern or the geometric shape. I will go ahead and glue this recipe card onto the back of my art journal page so that I know why I did what I did when I look back at this page later. I hope you enjoyed this process. I know it's interesting. There's not really much of a specific focal point other than the hexagons, but I kind of like it. So thanks for stopping by. Leave me a thumbs up, share my channel, and have a great day.